Kohaku channels for unfair campaign advantages.
Maui's free speech station.
I give no strings, I have good fun. I know more ties with anyone.
KAKU 88.5 FM.
Although the deadline has passed for KOFA citizens who were affected by the
Saturday
Maui
night at
wildfires
8 and Sunday night at 9 on KAKU 88.5 FM.
One, two, three, four, five, six. Hey, I can hear myself now. Golly. Good morning, Maui. Good morning, the world. It is August 12th, 2024. We have wonderful news from our producer, Jason Swartz, which this is his platform that I am filling in on. He had a successful surgery the other day. He is up and moving around. Just rocking the world. I know Jason and I walk together. We water walk together. And I am so excited to have him back in the water with me and then hopefully get him back doing our ground pounding, walking the streets of Kihei at some point in the future. So, where are we today? We are post-election for Maui County, which is really exciting. I know here at Akakaku, they had some incredible exciting things going on with their folks here. I'm not going to talk about those races because I'm going to kind of leave that be. So we're going to talk about today, where did England go wrong, or where did the United Kingdom go wrong, causing the American Revolution? Everybody goes, did a bunch of rich people come and come to the United States or come to the Americas seeking wealth? No, they came seeking independence. They came because they didn't have any representation. They didn't have any representation. Okay, They didn't have representation. So does that get you angry? Does that get anybody angry when they don't have fair representation? Well, let's talk about that today. We've got a lot of different rabbit holes we're going down, a lot of historic rabbit holes that I have spent my entire life going down as far as this is concerned. But back in those days, King James and the founding of the colonies was the king of the America's territories. He basically was a godlike ruler. He was so far removed from the colonies that he didn't have any real grasp at what was going on there. That may ring true with a lot of Hawaiians. They're going like, well, hey, you're in New York City. You're in Washington, D.C. How do you know what I want on my island? You're telling me, people in New York, people on the East Coast, people all over the mainland are telling me how our island should work. Well, wow. Think about that. Just think about that. Think about that. I hear that from every one of my homegrown Hawaiian friends who have history on Maui. Why do they keep telling us from the mainland how to do things here? I hear it over and over. Those are the same exact words that were coming out of the colonist at the time of the beginning of the American Revolution. Wow. Okay. History does repeat itself. It wraps itself differently. The language may be a little bit different, but if you look across the entire world governments throughout history, the farther the governmental structure, government being the management of the people's business, the farther it gets pulled away from the people who that it is serving, the people that elect it, the people that put those managers in power to take care of their business. The farther it gets away, the closer we become to that King James moment where, hey, we just need to get together. If they're not going to listen to us, something's got to change. You hear a lot of concerns today. Because mass media, high dollar media stations, social influencers that make lots of money are getting paid to tell you one thing or another. They need to make it so exciting and so extravagant and so polarized, because if they don't, nobody will watch them. You might remember that show, 20 years ago. I think it was called Jackass. And they did extraordinarily stupid things. And the producers of the show at the time on MTV, I believe, oh, this will never work. This is just too outrageous. And it continued to work and continued to work. And it was like, that's a symptom of a mental and a momentary time where we're going like, we need it to be so exciting, so thrilling, so exciting. Tom Cruise rappelling into Paris, into the Olympic closing ceremonies. It's got to have flash, glimmer, glory, or it doesn't sell. Okay. The pitfall of the people that are selling that glitz, glamour, and glory in order to sell their used-to-be newspapers, sell their advertising time on all the major networks. Those things have changed. The game has not. My goal in the next few sessions, and hopefully I'm going to have some folks that actually make it in, because sometimes that's not an easy thing for folks to do. We have this moment in time right now. We're having that King James moment, part of our history, where are we going to be a nation that gets driven by influencers, that gets driven by high-dollar media who are making it so spectacular we can't turn it off? They have the major news networks are slowly in decline. So as something goes in decline, they make it much more glitzy, more exciting. They want you to listen. They want you to see their product. Many of us remember Walter Cronkite. I'm at like the edge of that because, that's my parents' generation, my older brothers and sister generation. Walter Cronkite got on the news when my brother was serving in Vietnam, and my parents were glued to that television broadcast. They trusted him to bring the news. Walter Cronkite did not bring his opinion of what he saw on the news or other people's opinion of what he saw on the news. He brought straight up facts, and he brought them as clear as he could to the people of our country. We had many great journalists throughout time who have strived to do that. It is a cornerstone of our republic that we have people bringing us that information that is so absolutely critical to our republic. But for anybody to do that, there's lots of money involved. Money corrupts everyone. Power is the greatest aphrodisiac. Once you get some power, you are going to want more power. So what do we do? What do we do, Maui? What do we do, Hawaii? What do we do, our fellow countrymen? We're at that King James moment. The media is trying to drive a narrative to drive us apart. And this is the time we need to drive it together. They tell us that we have more job creation than we've ever had. And they want to run with that. They want to talk about that. And that's a great statistic. They leave off the point that 3/4 of those jobs are part-time jobs. and that over a third of our population, up to half of our population, are taking those part-time jobs to go along with their full-time jobs to make ends meet. We've experienced that in Hawaii longer than anyone else. Our cost of living has accelerated faster than any place else in the country. So we know that. We know our food costs, but we love living here. That's part of who we are. Everything is in balance. And we are in balance with the Aina. So that works. So let's go back to 1774. The Continental Congress met. You know, we had a government before 1776, even after 1776. It was the, oh my lord, I love it when I lose my brains here. But we had the Continental Congress, which were, each of the states had representatives that met together when they formed the United States Constitution. Our Constitution is the absolute bedrock of what our country is formed on. Today I want to talk about the 17th Amendment. I would love to see the lines light up to tell me somebody that's going to know what the 17th Amendment is. Reading the Federalist Papers, and I've been going over the Federalist Papers now for about 3 or 4 weeks. I've been perusing some of the Federalist Papers. I belong to an organization called the 10th Amendment. And I've been reading and I've been listening, and some of the greater scholars. When we set out as a new republic of states, we had many opportunities to conform our government to our needs because they were an extension of us. At the time of the 17th Amendment, there was a ratification made in 1912, just in that real whimsical period before World War I, doing all that, where there was a lot of change going on. Prior to the 1912 compromise for the 17th Amendment, the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. was combined of directly elected representatives from each state's district to represent their state in Washington, D.C. to carry out the people's business. Prior to 1912, senators from each state were appointed by their state legislature to do the state's business in Washington, D.C. The senators prior to 1912 were appointed by the legislatures of each state to go and do the business of the state. Jefferson writes, Ellsworth writes, all in the Federalist Papers, that this alignment gave the states the power to keep and hold the sovereignties of our states. It gave a double reinforcement that the People's House, the House of Representatives elected directly from my state and your state, handled the people's business. But on a double safety belt, our senators were appointed by the state legislatures in the Articles of the Republic, our Constitution, Article 17. And you might say, well, that's not fair. But what it is, and what Jefferson writes, what Ellsworth writes, what many of the scholars of Hamilton, I could go on and on. Their scholars wrote back then, and they knew that 200 years ago, that keeping it that way keeps the centralized power, which could offer the most opportunity for corruption and be creating a whole new kingship in the United States. We don't want that to happen. We need to make sure the power rests in our states. We want to make sure here in Maui that our voices are heard, and how we want our island ran is largely heard by our state, by our elected council members, by our mayor, by our representatives. We want our voice. We don't want people coming in and telling us what to do. Back to my first point. That's why, under the Article 17, up until 1912, that was intact. During that time in 1912, when they amended this, what were they thinking? Well, the newspapers became more affluent at the turn of the 1912. Everybody was getting newspapers. They had access to news. Their argument for making the change to having directly elected senators was, it's doable now. Let's do it. I mean, it works. Why can't we do this? Very few people went back, as far as I can read. There was some argument, some debate, but very few actually argued the point back then that why didn't they do that at the outset of the 17th Amendment? They should have. Today, we have senators that have spent, let me take that back to 1912 again. In 1912, up until 1912, senators who were appointed by their local Congress, back to local, back to Hawaii, back to the people here, like in every state, those senators had a direct responsibility to their constituents, to their people, their families, the people that did businesses in their little communities, their little states, the little farming communities, the ranchers, everyone. Those people had direct access to the state legislature who put them in Washington, D.C. to be senators. That changed. At the time that they did that in 1912, from what I read, they thought it was because people were more informed. They were more understanding, and I can venture to state their thinking was a lot like today, with instantaneous voting. If we look back in our nation's history and we look back at mob voting, just Google Salem and the witch trials. That was mob voting. That was mob voting. You get an angry mob together and convince them of something, that's kind of what democracy can look like without checks and balances. In 1912, they removed one layer of that check and balance that was absolutely critical for our country to keeping itself on the straight and narrow, because it took more rights away from the states. So without that check mark that says, hey, that senator has to go back and answer to their local legislature up until 1912. Legislature, or people that are elected to the Senate for the last 112 years, have not had to come back and answer directly to their legislators. Why is that important? Because on a very small scale, we have access to our representatives here on island. Back 10 years ago when I was struggling with cancer and I was going through all the pitfalls of getting through the federal healthcare system and all of that, and I said, you know what, I'll pick up the phone, and I made one call to Tulsi Gabbard's office. And within 2 months, everything was sorted out. Because my local control that I had, my representative, was able to do things for me in Washington, D.C. I actually gave Senator Maisie's office a call. She was also helpful. But that's what we need. This King George moment I've been talking about, where we feel disenfranchised, we don't feel like we have any access to what's going on. That 1912 moment when our senators could serve term after term after term after term has created the exact debacle written in the Federalist Papers over and over again. They didn't realize the scope that the media was going to play back in 1912 when they made this amendment. They did not realize the amount of money that could cross hands to get senators elected. When you think about it and you look at senatorial campaigns across this country, the money that's raised is unholy. It's an unholy amount to get a senator elected. When you have to raise that kind of money to get elected, what kind of representation are you going to get as a citizen where your senator has received over 90% of his campaign contributions from somebody off the island? I'm not saying that as a fact. I'm just using that as an example. 2 terms, 2 six-year terms appointed by the local legislature gives a stopgap for senators across this country from running away from their constituency, from running away from their legislators. This was one of those mistakes 112 years ago that is coming home to roost. They didn't know 112 years ago that this small podcast, or this cast that Jason Schwartz started putting out a decade ago, could reach 41,000 people, like the one we did on the wildfire the other day, the Wildfire Firefighters Association, which are trying to get secured income. They never knew that something as simple as happening in a small radio station here on Maui, TV radio, could reach out across the United States to 41,000 homes, but it has. They did not even think that that was not in anyone's wheelhouse back in 1912. If it had been in their wheelhouse, I don't believe this amendment would have passed. So I think we need to revisit how we get our senators to Washington, D.C. I believe in voting. I believe it's the hallmark of our government, our state government, and our federal government. Our state representatives that go to Washington, D.C. are directly elected by the people of Hawaii. Our state senators are elected by the people of Hawaii. The caveat to that, and every other state, how do they come up with $500, $900 million to run their campaigns? I very much doubt that a candidate in the state of Hawaii could raise that kind of money from the corner store mom and dad bakery or, one of our other little stores. No. We're losing that moment in time, and we're drawing closer to that King George moment where we need to make sure that people who say, I'm not being listened to, are listened to. And that's really what this is all about. It's happened throughout history. I talked last week with Jason about it. I talked about how the fall of Greece, the fall of Rome, the fall of many, many countries have failed. When we went to war with England, we learned how to do something absolutely fundamental in this country. We learned how to fight for our freedom. Once we got our freedom, then we kind of got lost going, well, how do we manage this new world we have? Okay, we have 13 colonies. We have 13 unions. We have 13 independent governments. It started getting lined out then. It started getting thought through then that all politics need to stay local. A senator today who can raise $1 billion in a phone call isn't beholden to its people as well as a senator that has to go back to their state legislatures, their state Senate and their state House, and justify what they voted for, what they've supported. There's that 2-layer safety net that as our constitutional state is, as we are, needs to be upheld. We lost track of it. It needs to come back. I don't believe that will be easy, but I think the people need to know where that came from. What happened way back then? How in the heck? What were they thinking when they changed that in 1912? They were thinking, well, we just want it to be more of a republic, more democratic. We don't want anybody appointed. Well, we are in a republic. Don't ever forget that. We directly vote for our representatives in the state House and in the state Senate. Those are directly from you and I. I voted the other day. I waved to the Hawaii camera and say, hey, I'm dropping my ballot off because I never remembered mail things. And it's like, wow, okay. That person who's representing me, if they live on island, which oftentimes they do, there's direct access there. We're a small group of folks over here. Even our families on other islands are still close family. If somebody's elected here, generally speaking, somebody in your family knows somebody in their family that knows how to contact them directly. And that's how government works. The government is the machine that does the people's business. So where are we going, Scott? Where is this whole argument going? Where are you going? How do we fix it? The fix is not going to be easy. But if we don't make those hard choices, they're going like, well, how do we fix it? I've had so many people that have emailed me after these shows going, well, what can we do? And I said, we need to revisit this. We need to revisit the 17th Amendment. We need to revisit what we did in 1912. We need to revisit how we send our representation to Washington, D.C. Because big money has changed everyone and everything. And that's very important. Let's talk about another way. Let's talk about what happens when we send our representatives and our senators to Washington, D.C. It used to be not long ago, and it used to be at the time of this 1912 decision to amend the 17th article, that we had lobbyists in Washington, D.C. There's lobbyists everywhere. I'm not going to say that they're not. And they've gotten a bad rap for the most part. But being a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. or in the state House, state Senate, that was an incredible badge of honor and a badge of trust. Joe Smo public has access directly to their House member or their Senate member here in Hawaii, as they do in the other states. But our lobbyists, our organization, ILWU, down here on Lower Main, they've always had a very strong lobby. What do they lobby for? Up until about 25 years ago, they lobbied for nothing but their workers. The auto workers always lobbied for nothing but auto-related infrastructure. The lobbies for the Medical Association lobbied for nothing but things that fell in the wheelhouse of the people who are paying union dues or voluntarily paying dues to these lobbies. The NRA is a lobby. The beef industry is a lobby. The fishing industry is a lobby. The tourist industry is a lobby. Those are organizations that we could all belong to here. A lot of us do belong to multiple organizations because they're a coalition, each one of them, of something that means something to me about how I run my business or what I think our country and where our country needs to go. So we belong to these groups so that we can put lobbyists in place And these lobbyists aren't Joe Schmo people. That is a lifetime commitment. Most of them have advanced degrees, some doctorate degrees in Juris Doctorate, so they understand how the political system works. So then they pick up a 5,000-page piece of legislation, which many of them are. These lobby groups will go through them with a fine-tooth comb and say, my cattle people, my beef industry people, my goat raising people, my grasslands people, my people that want to keep the island's craters free of everyone, they each have their situation, and when they gather together, they have a lobbyist that can convey that clearly and decisively. Where are you going with this, Scott? Sure, we know about lobby groups. They've been demonized. They've been demonized by the media. They've been demonized absolutely everywhere. Why have they been demonized? Because if high-dollar people that are sending your representative, your senator, big chunks of change to get reelected are taking that big chunk of change, then they have a vested interest in getting what they want pushed through Congress. They have an interest in putting what they want through Congress. Without using so much of the lobby as much as they used to rely on, now they rely on weaponizing social media with influencers. They've weaponized national broadcasting with all the major networks. They've weaponized everything for their agenda. No, Scott, they haven't done that. Well, what do you mean did they weaponize it? I'm not getting shot. I'm not getting yelled at. Back in the 60s, 70s, they came out with subliminal advertising. I don't know if you remember. You know, you should Google this, and that's a whole nother world. Google it, Siri it, whatever. Find out about subliminal advertising. The FCC, who controls our station here on Maui, who controls many media where we get our information, controls whether or not subliminal advertising can be put into your mind. Back in the 60s and 70s, when we were running cellular, video, or movies would come and they'd be reel to reel, they'd be flipped. They could put one flash in there and say, you need to go buy a Coke. And maybe another 2 minutes, they'd have one flash in there that you can't see, but your brain can see. And next thing you know, intermission comes and you're going to the lobby and you're buying a Coke. And they prove that to work. With unquestionably across the board, subliminal advertising works. Okay. So where are you going with the lobby here? Big money has the opportunity to set the stage. They have enough money to produce commercials. They have enough money to actually be the dollar producers behind a lot of the media that's flowing freely out there from the mass media. If it's an FCC-regulated station, that can't happen. I talked about it last week. I've talked about it before. We have this thing in my field called cognitive behavioral change. When I help people get over their fear of swimming, get over their fear of the ocean, when I walk them through that process, and sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it takes a long time. Some people, you have to give them an eyedropper of information at a time, and you give them another eyedropper of information. And slowly they become aware that when Uncle Buck picked them up by their shorts and threw them in the ocean, and they got gagged and choked, and everybody on the beach laughed, and that formed their opinion of what the ocean was all about, and they never swam or got in the ocean again. That was locked in, rock tight and solid when they were 4 or 5 years old. For many. Not all, but for many. And those people come to me when they've reached their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I work them through those fears. And they never swam or got in the ocean again. That was locked in, rock tight and solid when they were 4 or 5 years old. For many. Not all, but for many. And those people come to me when they've reached their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I work them through those fears. But the weaponization of the process that I take people from fear to fun is sad. You take people from fun and loving to fear. If you keep repeating something over and over and over on let's say all the power was off on the island, and this happens frequently, and you go to your neighbor, what do you know happened? And they said, well, I heard that, a palm tree fell over at the power plant and everything got knocked out. And then you talk to another neighbor, and they heard the same story, and they heard the same story, and they heard the same story about a palm tree that blew over out at the power plant. They didn't have any way to find that out, but it was just passed on. You didn't question it because you trusted your neighbor. Yeah. We used to trust Walter Cronkite. We have a whole generation of people who are now senior citizens and older that still have that belief that everything they hear on the news is gospel, truth. It's not. People have agendas. Corporations have agendas. Other foreign governments have agendas. Our government has agendas in other countries. It's plain, it's clear. You need to wake up and understand if a country hates us, we better figure out what we did and piss them off. What did we do? Look past it. Look past, oh, this happened or that happened, and all of a sudden the machine goes into the machine. Our past representative Telsey talks about that a lot. Many folks in government talk about the machine. Once it grabs hold and tells you we've got to go to, there's weapons of mass destruction sitting all over Iraq. They're going to use them. They're going to use them. How do we know? Why wasn't anybody asking that question? Why wasn't the evidence produced at House and Senate meetings? Why, when our representatives came back, when we went to a war with Iraq, did the People's House in the state of Hawaii and across this country say, why did we go there? Why did we spend trillions of dollars? Where's the evidence? There was no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. And we went and lost many American lives, some friends, some family, and way too many. Who made money? Who made money on each of our wars? Find that out. While I'm talking about this, when I say find it out, there is the key component of why it's so difficult today. We all believe that we're using the internet. Do you believe you're using the internet? Do you believe you're using the internet? Or do you believe the internet is using you? If you can fundamentally answer that question, Scott, I'm using the internet. The internet is not using me. You need to wake up. The internet is using you. They are programming your searches. They are influencing you. Social media, social influencers are changing, are augmenting the algorithms, the way we look for things. It used to be when I was looking up the Federalist Papers, and I referred to those many times in my life because they're the foundation of what our forefathers were thinking when we came up with this form of government that we live under. They're something that needs to be revisited over and over. The things we do make so much sense when you take the time to actually dig through those Federalist Papers. There were brilliant men back in those days. They wrote some incredible words. They saw the pitfalls that we've fallen into 200 years ago. It's difficult to believe that, but it's true. They knew what could happen if one branch of government got more power than the other. In 1912, where I started this disconnect, that division became more prevalent. We almost created a whole new division of government when we elected our senators directly by the people, because we took the power away from from each of us who are casting a vote for them, and gave it to the power of people who control our algorithms, who show us what we want to see on social media. I have a few friends that are much more savvy than I am with this. And one of them posted some videos where he took 2 separate laptops. And this was, oh goodness, this was 10 years ago. So this was quite a while ago in computer and internet terms. And they did multiple searches, and every one of their searches they did on one computer, they did with the vision of a George Bush. And the other one had a then they were mostly was a Hillary Clinton kind of thing, where they were always kind of looking for something Hillary Clinton said, and the other laptop was something that George Bush said, and they were going back and forth and back and forth. And then when they wanted to look up, let's say, the 10th Amendment, they wanted to look up the 17th Amendment, they would get opinions on the 17th and 10th Amendment that were relate to something that either George Bush had said or Hillary Clinton had said, or any of the candidates that were in high dollar positions at that time. Believe it. You may think you know how to use the internet, but it's using you at every opportunity. It's using you. We love to think that we can just get all this information, but we never question whether it's good information. Is it someone you trust? Is it verifiable? Or am I getting an opinion of the Federalist Papers on the 17th Amendment? Am I getting an opinion of today's interpretation of the First and Second Amendment? Wow. And they present it in such a beautiful package. It has every bow, every looking legal. It has this beautiful banner that looks like it is from the federal government or some major university. And it may have, but it may not have the Walter Cronkite, this is how it is. This is what happened today. No, it has their interpretation, their highlights, their most looked at moments on these things. So are you being used by the internet? Are you using it? This is a brand new tool. Can you believe I can dictate to my phone, rewrite things, look at them over and again before I compose something that I would like to write? It's amazing. When I was in college, I was the first one in my dorm in Southern Oregon State, and I got a computer. I got a Tandy 1000. Anybody that knows me knows that I've struggled with writing and composure most of my life. Scott would never shut up. But when it came to writing things out, I really struggled. And I was blessed. I got a Tandy 1000 from Radio Shack. It was like one of the first home computers that came out. And lo and behold, there was this big old floppy. After I wrote something, I put it in there and it checked my spelling. My GPA went through the roof. Oh my God. Oh my God. That was in 1983. Excuse me, somewhere back there. Don't get old. It's not for the faint of heart. Now, my phone, my laptop, they don't just check my spelling. They check my punctuation. They offer suggestions on rewriting, whether I want to make it a dramatic writing, whether I would like to make it a persuasive writing. Wow. And what's really amazing with AI today, and before the show, last night, I was looking this up. I just had a curiosity. I said, okay, what are people talking about on talk radio? People are talking about these, it listed about 6 different topics. And I said, if I wanted to write a topic, I asked the AI, I said, do I want to write a topic on one of these things? And then it hit all these points. So this is what you need to talk about on a radio show if you did this. And I'm like, wow. It doesn't just know that those are the number one topics across the United States on talk radio right now. They also know the opinions of those people who are calling in, those people who are being interviewed. They also know the ebb and flow of information, and they would like to change the tides, and they have been changing the tides for 50 years. They control the tide of information. We believe that getting a computer, getting a cell phone with internet on it was freeing. I love them. I hope to never live without one because I believe it's the greatest tool that has ever existed in the history of mankind that we know of. But knowing that, we also need to know that it can use us. And that was the purpose of the tool. If they know, listening to me or seeing what I'm searching, that they can create an algorithm that tells Walmart or Albertsons or Safeway or Costco that bread's getting really popular, they're going to be making it. They'll get a small algorithm that's going to say, we're going to need to up flour shipments to X store, and Z store because we see that the search algorithm is showing people looking up how to make homemade bread because it costs so much to buy a loaf of bread here on island. Okay. Then they see in that algorithm that people are looking up how to use the best flour to make the best bread that has not been bleached or chemically altered. And all of a sudden, Safeway, Costco, or Whole Foods now has a sale on that particular brand of flour. What? No. Yes. Yes, people. We need our representative government back. But we have the greatest tool we've ever had with our computers, with the internet. But sadly, that tool is being used against us. If it's just to buy soap or bread or flour or what we're shopping for. But what it also can do was help a politician who's got high dollar resources to contour a speech, contour a message, because they have an algorithm that's going to hit at the core of people who listen to shows like Jason and I, to Oprah, to everyone across that's doing these. I have my superhero guy that I love following on social media, Tim Pool. I've been following this young man, a skater kid, since he was covering social disrupts across the world. He'd be on his skateboard taking videos and selling them to media outlets. Now he has his own station. He's uncensored, he's clean, he's crisp. And he's one of the few people that I look at and go, interesting. And he seems to have made it. He's getting more views now. When I first started listening to him and hearing him, he had maybe 10,000 viewers. Now he's got more than CNN, more than ABC, CBS. I'm like, okay. The people are speaking out. They want to be listened to. But how are we going to fix our representation and bring it home? How are we going to make sure that the people of Maui are heard? Not just by Mayor Bisson, who I definitely have a great deal of respect for, Josh Green, and our representatives and our senators. We need to bring it home. We need to demand that we reassess the 17th Amendment and say we want our local legislators to appoint our senators so that when they come home from Washington, D.C., we can hold their feet to the fire. We want to let them know you did an amazing job because we have direct, close, next-door neighbor relationships to our senators of Hawaii and our representatives that serve in Honolulu. Those folks are our neighbors. They are people from our island. They are people who have blood on the island. This is our family, our Haina. This needs to be the way government has been repaired. We don't need a King George moment. We do not need to push it over the edge. We need to look back on our amendments. We need to read our Federalist Papers and go, oh my God, they saw this coming. They had no idea what television was. They had no idea what a telephone was. But they foresaw this trap that we have fallen into. It's amazing what's happened here. And we fell right into it. I can remember going through school, and I studied political science, and I remember reading the Federalist Papers, and I went, yeah, those guys had it together. But not until the last 5-6 years have I realized the dynamic presence of those forefathers of our government, our republic, and their brilliance, their foresight, and the pitfalls of giving too much power to one central place. We've fallen in the pitfall that Jefferson wrote about. We've fallen in it that Adams wrote about, Monroe wrote about. They all wrote about it in the Federalist Papers. It's astonishing. And they debated it. They went back and forth. But they knew that at their particular time, that it didn't seem like it was even possible for what's happened today, 112 years later, that we were losing touch with our form of government. Who lost touch with their forms of government? King George lost touch with what his colonies needed, wanted. If he could have kept touch with the colonies and somehow amended how he was handling the colonies, we could still be a colony of the United Kingdom, like Canada and Australia and New Zealand. But we're not. We're too damn independent, and I'm glad we are. But within that independence, it takes responsibility to know when you're being used. And it's not by people. It's by an algorithm. It's by a system that has grown so large. We need to bring that system home. We need to make sure it's accountable to everyone. We don't want to get that King George moment. Back at the Krupps, the beginning of the Civil War, beginning when Lincoln was elected, the beginning of that whole moment of the Confederacy went against the Union. The people's needs of the southern states, a few people's needs of the southern states were getting, their voices weren't being heard. The people in the northern states, most people were just worried about getting food to eat and a place to sleep in a safe place. Wow, here we are again, where half of Americans are worried about making rent, paying their bills, using credit cards to buy groceries and gas. Here we are again at that Revolutionary War moment where everyone is too busy paying the rent, car insurance, keeping the car running, buying groceries, to worry about their government, when that's the first thing they should be worrying about. We have reached the 11:53 moment here on KAKU Maui, the neutral zone, the not always neutral zone, as Jason loves to say. Jason is healing up. I got text from him this morning that he's actually out and walking on his brand new body parts. I haven't asked him if he can run faster or jump higher, like getting a new pair of Keds in the 70s. But I'm sure he'll be back with us soon. So I am still learning how to make sure I'm looking at the right clock and making sure that I'm not running way too far over. But it looks like I've got about 2 minutes left. So again, you have my phone number. It's on the thing at the bottom there, 808-372 7009. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, True Social, X, The Liberal News, everything. I believe in being transparent. You can reach me in a number of ways. Most of those are just for people who have gone their whole life not learning how to swim. But I would love to talk. Obviously, I've been talking for an hour, and Jason's not even over here sitting, so we're doing good today. So, again, here we are. We're running down. We have 1 minute, 52 seconds left, if that's correct. I've got Tony over in the other room. He's the Lord and Master of this space, and he's coaching me through this. So, again, if I leave you with one thing, we've been given a great tool, the internet. We have it on our phones and our laptops. We have it everywhere we go. Don't be a tool of the internet. Use the internet to be a tool for your knowledge. Don't be used by it. Just because you're using it doesn't mean you're not being used. Again, this is Scott, Akaku Radio, 88.5 FM, the neutral zone. Jason will be back with us, probably not too far away, as he gets himself all rehabbed. And if I had a little window that showed me what Tony was yelling at me about, I got 1 minute. Again, you want to talk about this? Some of my groups I belong to online that talk about the constitutionality. And it's not, the Constitution is one document, but the Federalist Papers, bam. What is the First Amendment? Well, you could probably pretty much tell me that's freedom of speech. Second Amendment, right to keep and bear arms, and so on and so on. But if you really want to understand those amendments, you have to go back and read the Federalist Papers. Those were the discussions and the arguments that were had, and discussions that were had to create those planks of our Constitution. Because we the people are still we the people. So stand up, make sure you vote. Make sure you're not being used. I have seen so many people, friends, family, all of a sudden realize that they had been getting used in the last 7-8 years and went, whoa, wait. You mean that's why I got a coupon for Tide? Oh, yeah, that's why you got a coupon for Tide. They know what's going on out there. It helps them make money. It helps them bring you products better. But the product that we don't want them to confuse for you is our elected officials. And that's the weaponization that's going on. Again, this is Scott Bushnell. And here we go. I've got a little play button. I'm going to hit over here, try to get it the right way this time. And here we go.
Hi, I'm Jason Schwartz, host of The Neutral Zone. KAKU is a listener-supported station. This means that all of the great programs you hear, like mine, are sponsored by you as well as our underwriters. If you would like to help keep